this lesson 3 of Quantopian pipeline, we're going to look at factors. In the first video, we mentioned that factors really gives you a numerical value. So here there's the definition again. A factor is a function from an asset at a moment in time to a number. So you actually generate a numerical value here. So I'm going to click Get Notebook and let it run in the background, and rather than you having to wait. So in this case, what we are going to do is that we're going to make use of the built-in factors. Quantopian has quite a few built-in factors. You can actually follow this link and see what are the built-in factors that you can actually utilize rather than actually write your own custom factors. So the first thing that we're going to do is to make a factor that computes the average close price of each asset over a trailing 10-day window. We can use the simple moving average built-in factor, which computes the average value of the input data, which is the close price that we're looking at over a specified window length, 10 days. To do this, we need to import our built-in simple moving average factor and the US equity price dataset. So let's come back over here. Looks like the pipeline tutorial has already been loaded. So this is really the explanations that we looked at earlier. Notice there's a slight change here in terms of the definitions. It's called float here. Float is exactly the same as numerical value, just that float is the term that is used in Python to represent numerical value that is really a real number. Going back to the earlier tutorial that we did, the previous tutorial in fact, we need to import pipeline. We also need a line that import run pipeline. And in this tutorial, there's some slight variation, is that we want to import the US equity pricing. What is in this US equity pricing is the open, high, low, close, and also volume that we want to download for the computations, because we are looking at the simple moving average here in this case. So notice that where you actually find the US equity pricing is under the data built-in, sitting under the Quantopian pipeline. And the factors itself, these are the built-in factors, which is simple moving average. It sits under this library here. So if we run that, okay, so basically we move to 1, so basically it's run successfully. So here what we want to do is create a simple moving average. Let's walk through this and just explain, take it slowly a little bit. Creating a factor, let's go back to our make pipeline function from the previous lesson. What make pipeline? Let me come back here. Remember earlier in the tutorial 2, over here shown here in our make pipeline, we don't actually have anything defined. We just define the function itself and then return the pipeline. That's it. We did not write anything in between or specify anything at all. So in this case, we're going to do something slightly different. We're going to add the simple moving average factor in here. To create a simple moving average factor, we can simply call the built-in function called simple moving average, because this has been written in prior. So we can call the simple moving average constructor with 2 arguments. Inputs, which must be a list of bound column objects. I'll come back to that in a minute. And window length, which must be an integer indicating how many days worth of data our moving average calculation should receive. Here it states that we'll discuss the bound column in more depth later. For now, we just need to know that bound column is an object indicating what kind of data should be passing to our factor. In a simplistic explanation for this, if you think about market data, what usually comes with it is the open, high, low, and close. Those, from my perspective, it's my interpretation, could be completely wrong, is really market price, such as open, high, low, close, is bounded to the market price. Whereas things such as income, price earning ratio, cash flow, operating cash flow, EBIT, things like this usually is not bounded to the market data. So that's really how I perceive, and that's how I interpret this statement. But we'll come back to the bound column in a future tutorial or later. The following line creates a factor for computing the 10-day mean close price of securities. So here we have a variable called mean close underscore 10. This is really a name that is defined by yourself. You can actually call it whatever you want. In this case, just to make it more explicit, it's called mean close, which means close price for the last 10 days, and the 10 here really means the last 10 days. So this built-in factor has the name called simple moving average, and the inputs really is where do we actually get the data for us to do the computation on. So we're gonna use the US equity pricing close price. Dot close is the price that, or the closing price is what we're gonna use here. Window length, we specify 10 here. Basically, we're looking at calculating a simple moving average for 10 days. And on the close price itself. So how do we add this factor to the pipeline? Again, I want to refer back to the make pipeline. Let me just come over here so that you can visually see. You see the make pipeline here is empty in tutorial 2. And this lesson 3 here is that we will add this one line that we just cover right here, copy it over, and then we return pipeline. Remember, return pipeline was blank before. We just stopped there, and now we have open bracket, and the columns we want to store 10-day mean close, as this is the so-called name that we give to the column itself, and the actual data to be attached to it is the mean close 10 that we actually specify here. So let's see if I run this and run this as well. And when we run the pipeline, again, it's the same format. We want to store everything into results. Run pipeline is the functions that we want to call, or class that we want to call. Remember, run pipeline is what we import earlier, which is this run pipeline here. And within here, what function to run is make pipeline, which refers to this. And what period do you want to run it on? And from 2015 May 5th to 2015 May 5th. So we're really only running one day for this. So as we execute this using Shift Enter, as we execute this using Shift Enter, you will notice that again, if I scroll down, there are 8,241 rows, and the stock ticker is returned, as well as the SID code, and there is a column called 10-day mean close, and which is what we actually specify here. This is the name that we coined for this column, and all of these value here. Notice that factors being a float or a numerical value or real number, as you can see here, is that it is being bounded to or being returned and calculated and returned for you. And now that we have a column in our pipeline output with a 10-day average close price for all 8,000 plus securities, note that each row corresponds to the results of our computation for a given security on a given date stored. The data frame has a multi-index, meaning we have 1, 2 index here. If it's just equity here, that's called single index, but in this case we have 2. If I scroll down a little bit, the index is the date and the asset ticker itself. For example, the first row is the date, and the second one is that will contain the result of our mean close 10 factors for AA on May 5th, 2015. Right, so if we run our pipeline over more than one day, so here May 5th to May 7th, and if we run this, it should be that we have one column, which is the 10-day mean close, with the date May 5th. If I scroll down further, it's May 7th. Okay, so basically we have 3 days. Now May 6th is not shown here, it's actually in between here, it's truncated. It's too long to actually output it in one go. So if it's 8,200 earlier, as we know, in one day, so you multiply by 3. So really this is 3 days of data here. Right. Factors can also be added to an existing pipeline instance using the pipeline.add method. Using add looks something like this. My pipe is equal to pipeline. Notice that we did this earlier, and now we just need to f1 equals to some factors, and my pipe dot add f1 would be how you actually add this factor, which is f1 here. Now the sum factor here, don't be fooled by the form. The sum factor here is this make pipeline that we had earlier. Now the most commonly used built-in factor is latest. Latest factor really gets the most recent value for a given data column. If you are looking or querying the price data, that is the latest data that you will actually receive from the pipeline. This factor is common enough that it's instantiated differently from other factors. The best way to get the latest value of a data column is by getting its .latest attribute. As an example, let's update make pipeline from earlier to create a latest close price factor and add it to our pipeline. So here we have make pipeline, we have mean underscore close 10, which from earlier, and latest close is close and the latest. So this is the latest price. Here you have two columns. One you call it 10 day, 10 underscore day underscore mean underscore close. Another one you call it 10 latest underscore close underscore price. And this is the so-called variable that you defined, and you attach this to this, and make sure you actually put a comma to separate them. And now when we run the pipeline again, exactly the same thing. You will notice with here, this one is just give me the first 5 and values. You will have the 10-day mean close, which is this, and the latest close price, which refers to this. And you can see that the data has been returned as we have requested. Right, some factors have default inputs that should never be actually changed. Such as the volume weighted average price, which is VWAP, has built-in factors. Now the name says volume weighted, so naturally the volume must be one of them. The other one is price. So those are the two things that you cannot change. So it's always calculated based on US equity pricing close and US equity pricing volume. So here you just need to specify the window length. The rest of it you will not be able to modify at all, such as the close price as well as the volume.